Great. Let's get started. So I'll quickly take a minute to cover what we discussed yesterday and also what we have covered so far in the retreat. By now, all of you have been spending time with your mind like we discussed. Normally, we narrate what happened in the past by saying, I was doing this, then I was doing this, then I was doing that. We assume there was a intentionality to it, or we say, I felt like doing something else, so I did something else. I felt like doing this, that's why I did this, right? So we understand our past as if we made it as a sequence of very, very intentional decisions. But when we start sitting, when we close our eyes, we find that it hardly takes any time before some thought just comes out of anywhere and completely takes our attention away. It's not just a thought coming up and waiting for your careful consideration that you can decide, okay, I have five thoughts on the table. Let me choose which one I want to put my energies on. It just comes and suddenly you find yourself in the middle of a story related to that. Middle of a story, you can say, or you can call it a reality that is related to that thought. Yesterday, we read the first sutta during this retreat. There will be one or two more that we will look at through the course of the retreat. And this one was interesting. It was just an excerpt. It was from Majjhima Nikaya number 10, or the 10th of the middle-length discourses of the Buddha. And we took an excerpt where the Buddha talks about different types of distractions or hindrances, things that come in the way of mental development. Things like, and he ascribed five different flavors that we can think of for them. Greed and aversion, the twins that say that the world is in a certain state, I want it to be different. So either I want something in my world that I like, or I don't want something in the world that I don't like, or I want the world to change so that what I don't like is not there, or what I like comes into it, right? So that is one way of thinking about the world, that we want to make some changes here. And greed and aversion are the kind of thoughts that they are the flavors of the thoughts that where your mind becomes stuck on the thought that I want this, why is this not happening? Or I want this, I will have this, and I will protect it with my life. So I'm talking about very extreme instances. Now, in every instance, we may not feel so strongly about it, but the fact that for some period of your time, that thought could completely take your attention means for that brief period of time, there is nothing else you want more in the world than for that thing to happen or that something else not to happen. Then you have the other twins. We have restlessness and sloth. So the constant seeking of information or the fatigue that comes from constant seeking of information, which makes us dull and unobservant. And then we have the central hindrance, the hindrance of doubt, the hindrance of not having confidence in what to do and therefore sticking to inaction and sticking to worrying about things. The only way things change is when we take action or we understand that there is no action to be taken and we place our mind in a wholesome state. So we talked about through the retreat, on the first day, we talked about the 6 hours or harmonious practice, we talked more about mindfulness yesterday, which is remembering to observe how attention moves from one thing to another. Where is it? How is it engaged with your thought? What is vying for your attention and how does it move? This how does it move is something very interesting. Now, as we continue to go deeper and deeper, we will start unpacking that as well. Today, I wanted to talk about the third skill. You may have seen this in the prep kit. There are three steps, and these three skills are not skills identified by me or by anyone else around or living today. These were skills that the Buddha taught. Okay. And I'll just place it in context. So the Buddha's, the core or the crux of the Buddha's teachings were presented in four noble truths that the Buddha gave. A lot of you may have remember it from reading it in history textbooks in school. Uh, so the Buddha says, what are the Four Noble Truths? The first one is the truth of dukkha. Dukkha is translated typically as suffering, but you can think of it as anything that is dissatisfactory, anything that is not completely satisfactory, that you're not 100% happy with, 100% accepting of. Anything that is away from that state of 100% acceptance and happiness is dissatisfaction. Okay. So the Buddha says there is dissatisfaction, the truth of dissatisfaction, that is the first noble truth, dukkha. The second noble truth that the Buddha gives is this dissatisfaction or suffering has an origin. It is not without origin, it has an origin. This is known as dukkha samudaya, origin of dissatisfaction. And the Buddha says this is craving, craving or taking things personally, getting attached to a certain thought, getting attached to a certain outcome. That is the underpinning of dissatisfaction or suffering. The third thing that the Buddha says is that with the cessation of craving, the underpinning of dissatisfaction, comes the cessation or end of dissatisfaction or suffering. So, since there is dissatisfaction, there is a origin for it. If you remove the origin, then the effect of it or the thing that is dependent on that condition, that also goes away. Right? So the third truth or the cessation of suffering is called dukkha nirodha. And the fourth truth is, since it's not enough to know this in theory, you should be able to apply this in your life, right? And he presents a path to get there. So this he calls the Noble Eightfold Path or Arya Ashtanga Marg. We will discuss this later in the retreat. We'll be in each of the discussions, we are unpacking parts of this Eightfold Path. Okay. And in the Eightfold Path, this is divided into different sections. There is a section on mental skills, right? So it's called Samadhi Skand. And it has three aspects: mindfulness, harmonious practice, and collectedness. So today we'll talk a little bit more about collectedness. So we are learning about the skills, and then we'll learn more about what the skills help us to uncover. So we will kind of get a sense of the landmarks in the mind, in the territory of the mind, so that we can watch out for them when we are exploring our mind. And then we'll discuss how all of this comes together, how you can actually start not only seeing things in your mind, but applying them for behavioral change in life and modifying your experience of life. Okay. So today we'll spend a little bit of time talking about collectedness, the third of these mental skills. I introduced it briefly yesterday, talked about how collectedness starts to happen. I will cover that again, and then we will also talk about the object of meditation that we use, the feeling of wishing ourselves or our friend well, how this happens, and what happens when your mind starts getting collected. What is the progression, and what is it leading to? Okay, so that's what we'll cover today, and a lot of you are moving towards some of the experiences that I'll be talking about today, and the others are getting ready to move towards that. Okay, so with that, let me just share my screen and use a couple of visual aids to discuss more about collectedness. Okay, I assume my screen is visible now. So we started with sitting with the object of meditation, sending that happy feeling, bringing up a happy feeling from memory, using that feeling and sending it to ourselves, wishing it to ourselves, and then to a friend. So this directedness of goodwill, this sending of loving kindness of this wish to ourselves or to our friend is the object of meditation. Every time our mind goes to a distraction, we use the 6 hours, recognize that our mind is drifted away, let that thought be, relax any tightness in our mind, smile and come back. Remember to use this as many times as required. We have another distraction come up, we use it again. Another distraction come up, we use it again. One of the things I've emphasized a lot in one of all our check-ins, but I want to call it out again right now. The idea of meditation is not to force our mind to be still or focused, right? The idea is to first allow it to gain the skills that help it to be focused. So we will get focus or stability of mind or collectedness as a outcome of doing this practice repeatedly rather than trying to force it by itself. So as an analogy, if you're trying to build a skill to as a child learning to walk, right? So the child takes baby steps. It doesn't start to train for a marathon right away. Right? So it starts taking baby steps, starts getting familiar with the territory, starts getting familiar with its own physicality, how it interacts with the environment, and slowly starts building upon these skills. So we want to expose our mind to its own internal environment and then use that to start building skills with the mind. So as we use this, mindfulness helps us to gets developed when we do the recognized step. As we start using this, we start coming back more and more automatically back from a distraction. We use the 6 hours, it starts to become more and more smooth. Distraction, recognize, let it go, relax, smile, and come back. Repeat it a few times. And after a while, what happens? The mind starts to learn. We want to sit here with the object of meditation. It also learns to look out for distractions. And over time, it also learns that for many of the distractions, what it does is it notes that they are there, but it doesn't chase after them. You don't have to do this actively. Your mind is already learning this. Your mind is already it's being reinforced that whenever your mind goes away, we are bringing it back. So maybe it's not necessary to chase after anything. As we keep doing this, we may come to a pleasant state where the mind stays with the object almost effortlessly. For a while, for a brief time, the mind says, okay, I don't care about any distractions. You can come and dance around me, but I'm not going to chase you. I'll be aware of you, but I'm not going to chase after you. And this is called collectedness, right? And what is the difference between this collectedness? Many of us experience during work, during something else, uh, we can get very focused, right? So there may be a period of time where you're not thinking about anything else, we need to do it. That comes with a little bit of force, that comes with a flavor of greed or aversion or one of the hindrances that I have to get this done. There may be fear that if I don't get this done, I will be late for submitting whatever it is. Or there may be like, I really want this, so I'm going to really get after this. Okay. So we can get into that kind of state. Here, what's happening is we are not, like I said, the objective is not to clear the mind, the objective is not to be concentrated. The objective is to train the mind to keep coming back to that wholesome home base that we are creating. And the mind learns to be collected without creating any kind of stress within us. It is collected very effortlessly. It is also aware. It is not let it's become so tunnel vision that it's not aware of anything else. Other things are happening. It is aware, but it doesn't go chasing after that. This is called jhana or dhyan samapati. So these are states of what is known as samadhi. Samadhi normally has the connotation of somebody who's literally doing their last act on earth. That's how we know it popularly, but samadhi is just a state of, so sama is stable and level, and dhi is your knowledge or understanding or mind. It's a word related to that. And that just means that your mind is very stable and collected, right? So samadhi is collected mind. And that is what we will be getting to. And this has no connotations of, you're completely cutting off ties with the world or anything. So that's become, there are some extreme states of samadhi that some people, take, and that becomes famous. So we think that is the only way of achieving samadhi. Having been collected, being absolutely at peace, not being bothered by anything. And you may experience this even when you're sitting, you're on a holiday and for some time you have absolute peace. Your mind is not racing after anything. You are involved in whatever you're doing. Maybe you're at a beach building a sandcastle, or you're in the middle of a hike. You're not very bothered. You're not too attached to the hike that I have to do this in, 4 hours and 37 minutes or something like that. You don't have anything. You're just completely in balance and in sync with the world. So collectedness can come like this also. In fact, the Buddha, before he had his enlightenment, so this was the last thing he remembered. He had practiced extreme austerity, put his body to extreme tough measures, living on a single grain of rice at a time, on a per day at one point. And he was at his wits' end, literally. Somebody offered him, a lady offered him, I won't go into the whole story, lady offered him some rice. And he had a rice or like kheer, right? And he had a bit of that. And immediately at that time, his mind went to a time when he was a child and he was just sitting under a tree, apple tree, and there was some procession or some festival happening around him. And just very easily, his mind became collected and at ease and very pleasant. There was suffering was or dissatisfaction was nowhere close to that. And he realized that, and he then went on. So for his enlightenment, he actually went on to go through these collected states. He decided that fighting to make things a certain way, or saying that, okay, none of this matters, just get as much pleasure as you can when you can. Neither of these strategies works. So allowing the mind to become collected and calm without fighting with it, without desiring it terribly, is the best way to actually develop these states. And in the Majjhima Nikaya, the middle length discourses, out of 152 suttas, in more than 50, the Buddha says jhanas are the way to enlightenment or awakening, or to put an end to the patterns of mind that lead to dissatisfaction. So, this is the method that he talks about most. Today, we often hear, okay, breath and one thing and the other, but this is actually the method that he taught the most. So I just wanted to talk about this, the jhanas. What we'll do, there are 8 jhanas actually, different states. I will very briefly talk about them. And I'll also talk about the object of meditation. So many of you may have found that it's quite unusual to hear about metta as a object of meditation. People who have done Vipassana courses, Goenka Vipassana courses, they do an entire course, and at the end of the day, end of the course, there is one day where they spend some time with metta. So why? And most of the other meditation is with breath. Most of the people around the world associate meditation with breath. So why do we use this object of meditation, and what is metta? And there is a term called Brahmaviharas. So I'll just talk about that a little bit. Okay, great. Yesterday we talked about a little bit about our evolutionary background, right? So we evolved from living in extremely uncooperative, hostile environments. At any point of time, there could be a threat to your life, and finding food, finding sustenance was not a simple task. So you could not order off an app and have food delivered to your home in 30 minutes, right? So that wasn't the case. So the mind had to be constantly information seeking, which is why we talked about restlessness is a manifestation of those that wiring within us. Also, what happens is the mind would always get very, very uh, attached to certain outcomes. So if I have to get away from a threat, I absolutely have to get away. There is no other option. It means life or death for me. If there is one apple on the tree, I have to get that apple. Or if there's one banana, I have to get it without letting anyone else get it first, without it going bad. I have to get it. It's a matter of life or death. But the same mechanisms also come to us when we hear somebody's opinion. The kind of fear or the kind of aversion that we may have to seeing something threatening to us, whether it's a tiger or whether it is a landslide coming towards you, the kind of aversion, the kind of fear that might come up may come up with something as simple as somebody making a comment on your body image, right? You might feel completely threatened. You might feel that I'm going to be come, go down in the value hierarchy of the society. That same kind of fear can grip your mind. Now, along with this, so does it mean that our mind is always needs to be in fight, flight, or freeze mode, dealing with threats, dealing with opportunities, always on the uh, attack, always in a life or death situation? So, no. Along with that, along with the mechanisms that put us in this kind of a system, we have other mechanisms that are related to another important part of our evolutionary background, which is cooperation and society. So, caring for one another, supporting one another, these are also extremely deeply embedded mechanisms within us. What happens often is that fear or negative information, there is always a bias because the threat of having your survival wiped out is more important than any opportunity that you might have, anything that you might have to gain from a current situation. So the mind is automatically biased towards information that can be a threat or negative information or something that can be an opportunity. So that will always come before cooperation and helping each other. But we do have that seed within us. So when we use metta as a object of meditation, we are trying to take our mind in the opposite direction. Instead of our mind looking at every distraction, every thought, and gripping onto it literally as if it is the most important thing, as if it is an existential threat or existential opportunity. Instead of doing that, what we are doing is we are on the side, we are inculcating a state of mind where the mind says, I'm at peace, I'm with, I am not threatened at this point. We had that mode when we would be maybe with our tribe, where we know that nobody's immediately trying to harm us. It was a refuge from when maybe you would go out for hunting and gathering. So this is the seed that we try to nourish, try to cultivate. So we have this seed when we start practicing, when we intentionally stay with the object of meditation, wishing well for us or wishing well for our friend, we start nurturing the seed of metta. This is the first of the Brahmavihara. So Brahmavihara, as the name suggests, is an abode fit for a god, right? So this is what we want to be our home base. So I mentioned earlier, what happens many times, a lot of distractions come because we don't have an alternative for that. We don't have a home base. So we are always either our attention is with something, or if our attention is not with something, it will get distracted to something else. Even when our attention is with something, we are not collected, it will get distracted to something else. So we are trying to create a healthy home base that we can go finish some activity that we need to do and come back to this home base, finish the next activity that we need to do and come back to this home base. So as we start nurturing it, the seed starts to sprout, right? We start with metta. There are some of you in the group who are struggling a little bit with this, and sometimes our seed needs a little bit of fertilizer. Okay, and I am changing some of your practices. For some of you, I will also be changing your practices tomorrow. So what happens is sometimes for this seed to sprout, some, you need to let go of some of the after effects of a lifetime of holding on to existential threats and being in that mode, being in that survival mode, right? And what happens is often we have things that need forgiveness within ourselves, for ourselves, and for others. Incidents that have happened in our life that we have treated as a threat to our survival as much as our ancestors would have when they were being chased by a tiger, for instance, right? So there are some of those things that we need to diffuse these things to be able to stay with that unconditional, giving, generous, loving, and kind mind. Okay. So for some of you, I'll change the practice. Once we fertilize the seed, we will have metta grow with even greater strength. So what happens metta as an object of meditation as we start using the 6 hours, being mindful of where our attention is, use the 6 hours when our mind is distracted away, your mind goes into the jhana. So the first jhana is characterized by some joy coming up. Your mind may be stable for a very brief time initially. As you practice, as you gain mastery, you can stay in this level, this first jhana, for a long time. But initially, your mind will, the first signs of your experiencing that state is you'll stay with your object for a little while. Will be the first jhana. It's accompanied with a feeling of joy. As we continue to stay, as we continue to reduce the craving in our mind by using the 6 hours again and again, the overall craving in our mind is coming down. The overall mode of fight, flight, freeze, the survival mode is getting toned down. We are kind of cooling down, right? So after a workout, we need to cool down our body. So we start cooling down a little bit and we go to the second jhana. In the second jhana, typically the mental chatter will go down quite significantly and you will start to get more confidence. You'll feel that whatever I'm doing seems to be right. As you go deeper, as you reduce the craving in your mind further, your mind goes into the third jhana. So some of you have told me, and others will get to this point soon, that you feel like your hands and feet are disappearing, or they're like they seem like they're not there unless you actually pay attention to them, or something. Maybe an insect comes and sits on them. So this is the third jhana, and this is characterized by a lot more stability and less decreased feeling of being, having a heavy body or very, it's called decrease of gross sensations of the body. So it starts becoming more subtle sensations of the body. From there, we go to the fourth jhana. Some of you have felt the metta kind of rise up to your head, and others will too soon. Okay, so that is a sign of going into the fourth jhana. You're experiencing it. You don't understand the difference between these states. You don't have any skill with them right now, but your mind is learning something accidentally. So it's as if you give somebody a bike and they manage to do a wheelie right up front. Okay, so your mind is learning some skills. It's going there, and we want to kind of nurture those skills. So you'll start feeling that. At this point, I will change the practice for some of you people. And for people who need more fertilizing, I'll be changing their practice to a practice called forgiveness also. So that's why the check-ins with me every day are important. So maybe we need to change some practice so that the wheelie doesn't become a cause of accident, right? So we want to make sure that it becomes a skill. You start to get better at it. And for those who may be struggling a little bit, it's not because there is a problem with the seed, it's just that the soil needs a little more fertilizer. So I'll change the practice accordingly. Please book your check-in slots with me. Okay. Uh, Great. So after the fourth jhana comes something. So these are called the Rupa jhanas because you have a much higher sensation of the body. And after this, you start going towards Arupa jhanas. And what happens is the first Arupa jhana is called the base of infinite space. You don't need to worry about all these names when you are in a certain state. I will share more with you in your one-on-one check-in. I just want to talk about the progression. And the amazing thing about this is all this might seem like we're talking about woo-woo and a very strange world. But these are written out in extreme details. Each of these states, what a person experiences in, they're provided in extreme details, and we see in thousands of students going through these same states, having the same kind of experiences while being in each of these states. So once you start experiencing them, you will get a better understanding of what I'm talking about. In the base of infinite space, what happens also is the feeling of loving kindness will change in texture. It will start to feel a little different. And this is the feeling of compassion. So, very interesting word, compassion or karuna. What happens is now the plant is starting, from the sprout, it's becoming a seedling. As we work with loving kindness, as we use that as a object of meditation, and we start to learn more about our mind, how it goes chasing after different things and comes back, we start to understand how a lot of dissatisfaction in our life is not driven by us. It is just because our attention gets tangled with different thoughts and doesn't know how to come back. So this helps us understand that also we also understand that we often do unskillful things when our mind gets hijacked by something. We didn't want to be angry about something. We wanted to maybe let it go. But the thought kept coming, and then we were in a whole cycle of anger. And then we did something that we regret, right? And we may end up harming not only ourselves but other people by those actions. So once we start understanding this, what we also see is probably the people, other people in the world go through the same thing. They may have good intentions in their mind, but from time to time, their attention gets caught in unhelpful and unwholesome cycles, and they end up doing things that hurt themselves and hurt us. We always say, so what happens is whenever we do something bad, we always have a very good explanation for it. But when somebody else does something that we don't like, we say that this person was exactly clear about what they were doing. They had an intention to hurt me and they hurt me. They had all the facts at their disposal. They looked at the world the same way that I did do. They were completely calm and collected in their mind, but just to hurt me, they did something. Right. So we can have this kind of a thought process about other people. So as we start understanding how our own mind goes into compulsions and does unwholesome things sometimes, we start having more an appreciation of other people's suffering also. And this leads to the rise of compassion. This accompanies the fifth jhana or the base of infinite space. When you get into this jhana, you will feel a feeling of expansion. I won't talk too much about it. I don't want you to start imagining things, but when any of you get there, I will tell you something and you'll be able to relate exactly with what I'm talking about. From there, as we continue to develop compassion, we develop mudita. Mudita is a very interesting word. It means joy at other people's happiness and success. So this is a tough thing because every time we see somebody else succeed, our immediate natural reaction is to say, okay, what does that mean for me? Am I less successful? Am I less good? Am I less capable? Am I further down the social hierarchy? This is because, again, this is also part of our evolution, right? So we always have a certain position in the social hierarchy. That's how we have evolved, and we start thinking about that. And even though we may wish the other person well, there is always a little bit of aftertaste of that. Mudita means completely unconditional celebration of happiness at another person, success, another person's happiness. And how does this come about? Because with compassion, we start understanding how, without intending to, people are suffering and creating poor outcomes for themselves and for other people, hurting themselves. So anything, any break that they get from that, any little bit of respite they get from that, we appreciate it. We feel happy about it. This feeling accompanies the sixth jhana, which is called the base of infinite consciousness. By the time you get here, your senses become extremely sharp. So as we keep going through the jhanas, the amount of distractions that are coming up in your mind keep coming down, because your mind says, hey, these things are not important. There will still be some things that pop up, but your mind will not chase after them. As they keep coming down, you also start moving towards the beginning of attention movement. So remember, I said the fourth thing about mindfulness, seeing how attention moves from one thing to another. So we are always in the middle of this story, then we are in the middle of this story. What happened in the middle? How did we get here? So initially, you may take a minute in a distraction before you realize that your mind has gone away. Over some time, you will start seeing that your mind is tending to move away. Okay? So you'll start to get closer and closer to the beginning. And at some point, you will start seeing the beginning of something that's going to take your mind away. So you hear a sound, and you know that my mind may be attracted towards this sound. There is an inclination towards that. So you start seeing the very first instance of contact with of any stimulus with your sense organ. So at this time, your hearing or your smell may become, or your sense of touch may become extremely sharp, right? So if you hear a sound, you will hear it in great granularity. So if you hear a fan moving, you may literally hear every ball bearing inside it. If you hear something drop, you will hear like multiple different sound waves hitting you. Or if you feel a little bit of wind, you might, feel it on each of your hairs. So your mind becomes very, very sensitive. That's why it's called the base of infinite consciousness. From there, your mind gets even calmer. The amount of things happening in your mind becomes even less. So we are moving towards the beginning of different events, and now we are starting to avoid even the beginning of many events and just stay with the object without chasing after these. And that leads to the fourth of the Brahmaviharas, which is equanimity. Equanimity is the highest state. No matter what happens in your life, no matter what you experience, your mind says, it happened. Do I have to do something about it? What is the best thing I can do that decreases, that creates wholesome outcomes for me, that creates wholesome outcomes for other people? What we think about, how we decide to act is not colored by likes and dislikes. Whatever happened, happened. Somebody came and bumped my car, happened. What do I have to do next? I don't need to get frustrated that it's my new car, or I just ran out of insurance, or why can't you see where you're driving? I don't need to think about those things. I just simply need to do what is required. And that requires the experience of that quiet mind. So the equanimity is associated with the jhana or level of samadhi called the base of nothingness. When you experience this, when you start getting this, your mind develops an extreme sense of calm. It's a superpower of equanimity. From there comes another jhana called the eighth jhana. Here you will have no feeling, nothing. Your mind will be extremely, extremely calm. You'll hardly register anything. And what happens is when your mind is in that state, comes the you can go into a state that is called as nibbana. You can have a event that will suddenly put all your mental activities in construct. It is as if you figured out the magic trick. What does the mind actually see in this state? What does it learn about itself? That we'll unpack going ahead. We'll talk about that more detail, how the entire mechanism of the mind can be understood in that moment. But the jhanas, as we go successively through the jhanas, can lead to nibbana if the conditions are right. Nibbana is just a complete understanding of your mind. Then your mind becomes a tool for you to use rather than a master of your experiences, right? So it helps you to do good things for yourself and for other people rather than say, okay, now I'm going after this, now I'm chasing after this. Now let's sit and get frustrated for a half hour, or now let's start lusting after one thing that we want. Okay. Instead of that, your mind becomes a complete ally for you. Even it doesn't need to be just that state. That state is a very strong transformation event, but even starting to do the practice, starting to use the siksa, starting to see the mind, starting to develop the Brahmaviharas, which are directly in contrast to the fight, flight, freeze mode, right? So directly in contrast to that battle of survival that we're always fighting. Starting to develop this will already start to make the mind our friend. Okay. Uh, do we have time? I just thought I might comment on one more thing. Actually, I'll take a pause here. So, any questions, any thoughts? A lot of this might have sounded very interesting. Some of you are experiencing some of the things I'm talking about. The others will. We'll get there. But any thoughts, any questions about what I shared today? Okay, great. This is just for you to know so that when you experience it, you can make sense of what's happening. Okay, so there's not too much that you can understand and apply logically or intellectually over here. Today, just it's kind of I'm describing the landmarks in the territory. Okay, so when you start coming to those landmarks, and in our check-ins, I tell you that hey, you just passed this landmark, so you'll start getting a sense of what's actually happening, how this process is unfolding in your mind. Okay, great. Any other questions related with the practice? Anything you experienced in your daily life? Anything that using the six?
I think Rajiv dropped off. Let's just wait for him.
Hi, back. I think today the internet was kind enough to let us finish the session, the talk part of the session. Okay. Yeah. So the last thing I was saying is anything that you observed based on the things we've been discussing, based on your practice, started becoming aware of any habitual patterns that you see in your daily life that earlier just seemed like something that happens, something that you do, but now it seems like it's a distraction taking your mind away. It is something that maybe you don't need to spend so much time with. If you tried using the 6 hours in an active situation, so please, I'll be happy to answer any questions related to that, or if you would like to share some observation you had, it'll be great for the group. It may start, some thoughts for me or for other people.
I'll just like to share. I was actually out today shopping, and I think it's very easy to get distracted, especially when you're like at IKEA or something like that. So I think the 6 hours kept coming back to me because I did have a bunch of things I needed to get. And somewhere it was there, like I think it's now sort of there in my consciousness, not just when I'm doing the meditation, but it's there post and pre that as well. So I think so that was sort of brought my attention back to the couple of things that I was looking for. Otherwise, I was just getting distracted with all the shiny objects and running after it.
So you're getting two for the price of one, right? So you're getting mindfulness as well as 6 hours. So being able to observe it and also being able to
Yeah.
get
So
your mind out
recognizing,
of
I
that.
think, is happening a lot more even through the day. I'm starting to recognize when I'm immediately pulled away from something that I'm to do. So I think that's something that's changing. Thank you.
Excellent. Great to hear that. So yes, all you need to do is follow these instructions. All these things will happen for you. And if you haven't been checking in, please check in, because so unless you want to go to a foreign country and say that I won't use a phone, I won't use anything, I'm going to explore the city. That's one way to do it. Might take a fairly long time. So the Buddha spent 6 years searching for it, and then he put it together in a way that we can use it. So if you would like to take advantage of that, follow the instructions very precisely, right? So even here, going through the jhanas, it requires you to use the relaxed step, that understanding, making sure you don't just get your attention back, right? Use the relaxed step. No, keep an eye out for that during your day also when your mind gets tense. If you are ever worried about something, if you are having an argument, right? If you are obsessing over something, maybe you need to go, you want to see a movie, or you want to, suddenly, you want to eat. Try one thing, right? So I don't know how many of you are fast eaters, but when you eat, just try one thing. What happens if you're eating with a spoon, for instance, you take a bite, put your spoon down and just set it down on the plate, finish your bite, and then pick up the spoon again. You just try this simple thing. You'll start seeing, normally our mode is to put in one spoon and then we're ready with the next, and sometimes we'll put it in even before we finish chewing the first mouthful. Just try to bring some deliberateness into different things. So what's happening here is you have an intentionality associated with the whole thing. You didn't just start one thing and then you're on auto mode, right? So just try it out and see how the mind constricts, or like, so you'll find yourself sometimes your attention will slip, and your mind is like, where is the next fight? Okay, so just you can try out something simple like this. This practice is not meant to be done in isolation, so it is not a it's not a spa day that you do. You go and you get a massage, or you get a something done, and then you come back and everything is back to normal. We have to start applying this slowly. Let's start with the two things. Let's just start, doing certain exercises more deliberately so that we are aware of what's happening, right? So even if you're just making your bed or folding your clothes, you'll find that your mind is running in all directions. Can you keep your attention with what you're doing, right? Can you see whether it stays there? Can you be mindful of where your thoughts are taking you? Just start with those things. Walking meditation is very important. I don't know if everybody's doing it. I'm not asked pressed on it too much in the check-ins, but I will do so tomorrow. That's a great, bridge to bringing this practice into your life. And any identify moments, right? So every day, the work week is starting for those of you who are working. You'll have some points, you'll have a commute or something that will be happening. There'll be some points where you're not doing something very actively. Use that time to do some active meditation. Send the free wish to your friend or send it to the people around you. Just have some intentionality to your mind, right? So break the cycle of being compulsive and completely at the mercy of thoughts that come and take your attention away. So start practicing that. Don't pressure yourself. Again, this is all, like I was complaining on the first day. For in my mind, this should have been part of fundamental education. I think dealing with the mind has to be one of the first things that we learn, or at least incrementally we learn through our education. We don't get learn. We only learn how to deal with the external world, some part of it, and we keep becoming experts at that. But what to do internally, unfortunately, not enough people know, and not enough people teach that. So let's use what the Buddha taught us and start making a difference in our. Okay. I'll just leave with stop with that thought. I'll just wait a minute if there are any other thoughts or questions, and if not, then we'll share merit and we'll call it a day. May suffering once be suffering free, and the fear struck fearless be. May the grieving shed all grief, and may all beings find relief. May all beings share this merit that we have thus acquired for the acquisition of all kinds of happiness. May enlightened beings of mighty power share in this merit of ours. May they long protect the Buddha's dispensation. Sad, sad, sad. Thank you all. Keep smiling and see you tomorrow.